We need more squished face models in games. Welcome back to How Many Tries, a content free time show where we look at 3D models in video games. Today we'll be taking a look at almost every 3D model for Pikachu from the Pokemon franchise, starting with his very first 3D model from the Japanese exclusive version of Pokemon Stadium, released in August of 1998. Look at this chunky boy. Of course, we all know what Pikachu looked like in 1998, right? Not a terrible first model. It is very cool that we got to see him in 3D so early on in the series' history, or at least kids living in Japan could. Although if I'm gonna be nitpicky, there are quite a few things they could improve upon with this model. I'd say the arms are a little too long. If we're going from the anime artwork from the time, his arms are a little more short and stubby. The legs, or I guess lack thereof, look pretty good, though the feet might be a little too big. I guess they weren't quite able to give him individual fingers or toes yet. The face looks pretty good though. Pretty spot on as far as the textures go. They even gave him a little more coloring in his eyes that they didn't have in the anime. A little bit of a reflection on his nose there. Texture-wise, this looks really good. Aside from the stripes on his back maybe being a little too thick, and on his tail, there's just sort of a browned gradient going halfway up it, rather than these like little spikes that he had in the show. Same thing with his ears, more of a gradient. There's not that clear cutoff between the black and the yellow. The overall shape of the model is not bad. I think it's just the arms that are throwing me off, because the rest of the body looks really good, I think. Even his tail has a surprisingly good shape to it. I would almost just expect this to be a completely flat, two-dimensional tail, but it does have a little bit of thickness here. You can see it's not just a completely flat shape. So that's kind of cool. Pikachu's very first 3D model was exactly 300 triangles. Overall, a very solid start to Pokemon in the third dimension. Next we have Hey You Pikachu, released in Japan in December of 1998. Some pretty major design changes here. This version is much more similar to the modern iteration of Pikachu we know and love. He's quite a bit slimmer. He's got a lot of personality in his face here, with that happy little smile he has going on there. His tail is very thick, very blocky for some reason. I don't know why they didn't just stick with the thinner tail from Pokemon Stadium. Personally, I think that looked a little better. This looks kind of like Lego pieces or something. But I'd say that's the only downgrade. Everything else looks better in my opinion. He's got actual fingers and toes now. Colors are a lot brighter, a lot more pronounced. I guess you could argue the eyes are a bit of a downgrade since they don't have any color in them now, but this is certainly more show accurate. The stripes on his back are more accurate to the show. Even though I'm personally a pretty big fan of chonky Pikachu, I can't really say that this isn't at least somewhat of an improvement objectively. Like, just look at the wireframes. I'd say this one on the right clearly looks a lot more Pikachu-like. This one on the left looks kind of like if you were to give Belly Bolt Pikachu's ears, and they more than doubled the polygon count. We went from 300 tries to 752 tries. Wouldn't it be cool if we could look at these models in real life? Well, now you can. Check this out. This is a 3D printed Pikachu. I made it using the Creality Ender 3 V3 SE, which AliExpress sent over for this video. And honestly, it's been super easy to work with. The dual Z-axis keeps everything stable so your prints don't come out looking all wobbly. The auto-leveling means that you don't have to fine-tune anything, you just push a button and it calibrates itself. And it prints fast. It printed this little guy in less than an hour, which I think is pretty good. AliExpress is holding a Black Friday sale from November 20th to December 3rd, with up to 90% off site-wide. It's one of their biggest events of the year. My affiliate link and discount codes are in the video description, and you can stack those codes on top of the sale prices for even more savings. If you want to start printing out your own game models, check out the link and the discount codes in the video description, and take advantage of that Black Friday sale while it's live. Next we have Super Smash Bros., released in 1999. Quite a bit more similar to that Pokemon Stadium model, I'd say. He's a lot chubbier, a lot rounder. His tail is actually completely flat this time around. It looks like he's got a pretty low polygon count looking at the wireframe here, and the textures are a bit fuzzier, probably a lot smaller file size. I imagine that was done to help keep the game at a high frame rate. All things considered though, pretty solid model. He's got a good shape to him. Not wild about the way the ears kind of curve back like horns. He's gone back to having no fingers or toes again, but it certainly gets the job done. Just a few more polygons than that Pokemon Stadium model. 317 tries. Next we have Pokemon Snap, released just a couple months after Super Smash Bros. In March of 1999. This is sort of an interesting in-between. I'd say this model doesn't have quite as much personality as the one from Hey You Pikachu, but he is still noticeably slimmer than the Pokemon Stadium and Super Smash Bros. Models. He doesn't have all of his individual fingers and toes, but he does have a little gap between his fingers and thumb here. He still has the coloring in his eyes that was present in every game except Hey You Pikachu. Completely flat tail. You can see it like disappears if I line it up with the Z-axis. Interestingly, it looks like they gave him a bit of asymmetry on the ears here. This one on the right looks normal, but this one on the left looks kind of lopsided. I don't know, I guess that gives him a bit more personality, even if it looks just a little bit weird, in my opinion. I love what they did with the stripes on his back this time around, though. Those look pretty great. And this model is still just 352 tries. Funny that it's so low poly for a game where you're like exclusively trying to get highly detailed close-up shots of different Pokemon. You'd think they'd want this one to have a slightly higher polygon count. Next we have Pokemon Stadium 2, released in the year 2000, which at first glance looks very similar to the Pokemon Stadium 1 model. However, when we turn on the wireframe, you can see there's quite a bit more going on here. He's got individual fingers and toes this time around. I actually think his fingers are a little too far apart. They look kind of creepy close up, almost like claws. But other than that, they really used those extra polygons to really smooth this model out, make it look a lot rounder, a lot nicer. At least as far as the shape goes. Design-wise, it's pretty much the same as that first model. This model is 686 triangles. And somewhat surprisingly, they used a different model for the mini-games in Pokemon Stadium 2 for Pikachu. This one's got a much lower polygon count for some reason. Maybe because the mini-games are so fast-paced. They had to do that to keep the frame rate up. You can see the textures on the face are quite a bit blurrier. They got rid of his fingers and toes again, but still overall the same basic design. This one has the lowest polygon count yet, coming in at 273 tries. Next we have our first GameCube game, Super Smash Bros. Melee, released in 2001. We have two different models again this time around, a low poly one and a higher polygon count one. We'll focus mainly on the high polygon count one, since the low poly one is just the same thing, but less tries. So right away you can see major improvement in the graphics. The N64 to the GameCube was just such a giant leap as far as graphics go. You can see all the little details in his little hands there and in his feet. It actually looks like he has at least somewhat defined muscles now, rather than just having these big blobs for hands and legs. They actually gave him a properly modeled mouth. It's not just a little texture drawn on there. The nose is fully modeled. They didn't fully model the eyes. Those are still just a texture, but I think that's fine. Still looks good to me. The ears look good, cheeks look good. Stripes on his back, still maybe a bit wide, but look good nonetheless. Major improvement on the tail, at least as far as the textures go. You can actually see the individual spikes now, where the brown meets the yellow. He does look kind of silly when he's stretched out doing a T-pose like this, but it still looks great in-game. Overall, great looking model. The low poly one is just 360 tries, while the high poly model is 3,806 tries. Holy moly. Just look at how round he is. Next we have Pokemon Channel, released 2 years later in 2003. Not my personal favorite Pikachu model. I think he looks kinda lumpy, a bit derpy. I think his arms are a lot longer than they need to be, at least aesthetically. They probably did this for technical reasons so that he could like grab stuff in game. Pokemon Channel, everyone's favorite game where you watch television with Pikachu. The stripes on his back and on his tail are a much darker brown this time around, almost black like the tips of his ears. And speaking of the tips of his ears, they have kind of a muddy transition between the tips and the rest of his ears for some reason in this game. His tail's a little bit thicker this time around, though not too thick. Certainly not as bad as the tail from Hey You Pikachu. I don't know, not too bad, just not my favorite. He looks a bit too humanoid. He almost looks baby-shaped when you look at him from the front, like a little child wearing a costume. High polygon count though, 5,834 tries. What's this inside of his face here? Oh, he's got like a fully modeled red mouth inside of his face. It's sort of interesting. Next we have our first mobile game of the day, Pokemon Dash, released for the Nintendo DS in 2004. Surprisingly similar to that Pokemon Channel model. He's got a really big bulbous head, about the same size as his body. He's got the same really dark stripes that Pokemon Channel model had, though this is obviously less detailed than the Pokemon Channel model since it's a DS game. Actually, I gotta say, this looks really good for a Nintendo DS game. You easily could have told me this was from a Wii game or even a 3DS game and I probably would have believed you. Nice bright colors. The texture on that mouth is doing a lot of heavy lifting, I'd say. Gives them a lot of personality. Pretty darn good for a DS game. The tail has a bit of thickness to it. Pretty darn good for a DS game. Pikachu's Pokemon Dash model is 972 tries. Moving on to the Nintendo Wii, we have Pokemon Battle Revolution, released in 2006. It looks like this is probably more based off of the Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2 models. He's got a bit more of that blob sort of shape to him, though he is noticeably slimmer than those models. This is definitely when they were starting to really lean into the slightly more slim version of Pikachu we know today. Still has the dark brown stripes. I'm surprised the brown on his tail is just a gradient. The Wii definitely could have handled the spikes on there like they had in Super Smash Bros. Melee. If we zoom in, you can just barely see some little fingers on there, some toes, just barely noticeable though. All of his facial features are just textures again. So I'd say this is definitely a downgrade from the Super Smash Bros. Melee model. Although I gotta say, the lighting engine in Pokemon Battle Revolution was incredible for the time. It did a lot of the work all on its own. I mean, just look at how much better this looks in-game than it looks here in Blender. You can barely even tell this is the same model. Beautiful lighting engine in that game, particularly for the time period. A Nintendo game in 2006 looking like this was pretty unheard of outside of like maybe Luigi's Mansion and Metroid, maybe. Next we have Super Smash Bros. Brawl, released in 2008, which I haven't fully fixed yet, just because I wanted to show you guys how creepy this looks. Here's what some of these models look like before they're textured properly. Add a little alpha node on there, a little alpha node there. Switch that from surface to volume. Same thing with that one. There we go. Much better. So they clearly went off of the Super Smash Bros. Melee model for this one, though when we put them side by side, you can see immediately the colors are much more washed out compared to Melee, which makes sense since that game was darker both in tone and as far as the art style itself goes. He's also noticeably slimmer than the Melee model. Nothing too big as far as design changes go. The black tips of his ears are quite a bit longer in Brawl. And one nice touch I do really like is that you can really see all the little individual spikes on the tail transition in Brawl. I think that looks pretty good there. The tail is maybe a bit blockier than it needs to be. Kind of has that Lego block thing going on I talked about earlier with the Hey You Pikachu model, but not too thick, I guess. Other than that, pretty similar to the Melee model. I just preferred the brighter colors in that game, and it's got quite a higher polygon count since this was on the Wii instead of the GameCube. We're looking at 4,472 tries. Next we have PokePark Wii, Pikachu's Adventure, released a year later in 2009. And this is where we really start to see the solidifying of the modern Pikachu design. This is basically what he would look like from 2009 till the current year. And I can see why. This is a really, really solid model. Everything about it has pretty much been perfected. The shapes are great. He's got individual fingers and toes. The textures on the face are great. Though I do miss the individually modeled mouth and nose from the Super Smash Bros. Games. This one certainly still gets the job done. The stripes look good. The tail looks good. I guess they really did settle on the darker stripes for his back rather than the more orange color from the earlier games. And they settled on the thinner tail design as well. And all that with just 1,508 tries. PokePark 2, Wonders Beyond, released 2 years later in 2011. Basically identical to the PokePark Wii model. When we overlap them here, you can see basically the only things they tweaked a little were the tail. They made it ever so slightly shorter, and they made the ears just a little bit thinner, or maybe a bit longer. They just tweaked the shape of them ever so slightly. At that point, it's almost like, why bother, you know? Those little tweaks that they made increased the polygon count by exactly 60 tries, bringing the total to 1,568 tries. Next we have the Pikachu model from the Pokédex 3D Pro, which was basically like a sort of tech demo for the Nintendo 3DS, released in 2012, which at first glance looks pretty similar to those last two models. though the tips of the ears and the eyes are noticeably grayer, noticeably lighter, not that dark black color anymore. The ears are also propped up a bit more, at least the way the T-pose for this model is rigged, though not sure if that has any practical effects in-game. And they lightened up the texture for his mouth. It's not this like black pencil look from before. It's more of a lighter painterly sort of look to it. Other than that, pretty much the same design-wise, though they did increase the polygon count quite a bit. This model is 4,688 tries. Very high polygon count for a 3DS game, I would say. But it paid off because I believe this is basically the same model we would see for the next, like, 6 or 7 Pokemon games. Pokemon X and Y, released in 2013. Essentially the same model. It does look like they lowered the polygon count just ever so slightly, probably for performance reasons, since this was an actual game and not just a Pokedex. And definitely the most noticeable difference here is how washed out the colors are in X and Y. I'd say generally I do prefer the more vibrant and bright colors from the earlier 3D Pokemon games, but there is also something sort of nostalgic about this more faded color scheme. It makes it look more like the early Ken Sugimori artwork. So I can't say I'm too disappointed with it. I still think it looked really good in game. And I was just super excited to have our first fully 3D mainline Pokemon game at the time. I'm saying it here, folks. Pokemon X and Y is the most underrated Pokemon game, aside from maybe Sword and Shield. Aside from the washed out colors, the only real difference I'm seeing is the mouth shape. In Pokedex 3D Pro, it had this more sort of generic animal mouth shape to it, if that makes sense. Whereas this new mouth looks decidedly more cat-like, I would say. It's just the two curves rather than this like long swirly line. I think I prefer the long swirly line personally. Which mouth do you guys prefer? Pikachu's Pokemon X and Y model is exactly 4,500 triangles. Next we got another twofer, Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS, released in 2014. And in that game, Pikachu has both a low poly model and a higher poly model for when you're up close to him and taking pictures with the in-game camera. This high polygon count model is so good looking for a 3DS game. It's got the bright, vibrant colors of the earlier Pikachu models, though decidedly more orange, which I kind of like. I like this darker orange color for Pikachu. I think it looks cool. Even the mouth is fully modeled in both the low poly model and the high poly model. The low poly model is 1,524 tries. The high poly model is 3,258 tries. And of course, 2 months after the 3DS version of Super Smash Bros., we got the Wii U version in November of 2014. This game doesn't have a low poly model for Pikachu, but it does have a squished face model for him, which I thought would be fun to look at. You know, when you're fighting and you launch someone off the screen and they fall down from above and smash into your screen. Yeah, this is that model. So this Wii U model is decidedly less orange than the 3DS one. Definitely more yellow. Other than that, I mean, looks basically identical to the 3DS model. It's crazy that the model from this little 240p 3DS game looks just as good as the model from this fully high-definition 1080p Wii U game, at least at a glance. When we turn on the wireframe, you can see it is significantly more detailed, though maybe not as detailed as you would expect. Again, going from the 2040p resolution to 1080p. Pikachu's Smash Bros. For Wii U model is 7,375 tries, over double that of the 3DS model. And funny enough, the squished face model is even more. It's 8,866 tries. Look at this silly guy. We need more squished face models in games. Dancing Pokemon Band released exclusively in Japan a year later in 2015. Have you guys ever heard of this game? I certainly hadn't until downloading models for this video. I guess it's some sort of Pokemon rhythm game that was only available for like 6 months or something. Maybe not even that, which is too bad. I'd really like to play a Pokemon themed rhythm game. I think that'd be fun. So oddly enough, this model looks more similar to the Smash Bros. Models than it does the ones from Pokedex 3D Pro and Pokemon X and Y. The color scheme is nearly identical to the one from Pokedex 3D Pro, but the face I think looks more like the one from Super Smash Bros. Although looking at the legs, they're definitely more similar to the ones from Pokemon X and Y. He's got those short stubby little things rather than these long stretched out ones that need to make contact with other characters in Smash Bros. Overall, a really good looking model though. It's a nice in-between, kind of a best of both worlds scenario. And pretty high quality for a mobile game at the time. 5,360 tries. Next we have Pokemon Super Mystery Dungeon, released in September of 2015. And this is a significantly less detailed model. I'm not sure why, since it was on the same console as Pokemon X and Y, the 3DS. But just look at how blocky this guy is. Super blocky, he's got a super low polygon count. The textures are blurry and muddy. The proportions are still pretty good, and I do like the coloring. The shading's kind of fun. He's got a cute little bandana. But look, he doesn't even have fingers or toes. This is like an N64 era model, or an original Nintendo DS model. Well, maybe not that bad, but you get the idea. With the bandana, this model is just 844 tries. If you remove the bandana, it's only 636 tries. Next we have Pokemon Duel, which I guess was another mobile phone game released in 2016. Not entirely sure, as I've never played this one, but apparently you collect trophies in this game, so this is more like a Pikachu trophy rather than the actual character, which explains the sort of exaggerated pose they have him in here. I don't really like how his mouth is just a texture. The model looks fine with the textures off, but I do think the mouth looks kind of odd, the way it's just painted on like that. It looks totally flat or two-dimensional. Other than that, the model's fine. At least he's got fingers and toes. 5,274 tries. Next we have Pokemon Sun and Moon, also released in 2016. This model's specifically from the overworld of Pokemon Sun and Moon, when you're not in battle, since the in-battle one is exactly the same as the one from X and Y. But usually when you're out walking around on the overworld map, these characters aren't going to be as detailed, they're more chibi, just because that's how the games were built. And keeping that in mind, this model looks fine. It really does just look like a low poly version of the in-battle model with worse textures and everything. Although they did give him the full squiggle back for his mouth. It's not just the two curves, so that's kind of interesting. Pikachu's Sun and Moon overworld model is 828 tries. Next we have our first Nintendo Switch game, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, released in 2018. Being one of the titular Pokemon from the Pikachu and Eevee subtitle, they did give him a number of expressions that the other Pokemon in the game don't have. I like this somewhat concerned look, so I left it on to show you guys. Looks kind of silly, doesn't it? Yeah, well, what do you think of that? It's a silly Pikachu, all right. It's funny because these eyebrows are fully modeled. Each eyebrow is 20 triangles. Was that necessary? Probably not, but it's pretty funny. Other than that, this is pretty similar to the X and Y model for Pikachu, though it is just a little bit more detailed. You can see, especially looking at his back, there's sort of a pastel-y color scheme going on here. You can see the texture in his cheeks. And the model itself is quite a bit more detailed. Pikachu's Let's Go model is 6,790 tries. Next we have Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, released just a month after Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee in 2018. They actually sapped the Wii U model of its color. Now he looks more washed out like he does in the mainline games. He still has these longer legs that he's come to be known for in the Smash Bros. Series, but other than that, he looks pretty similar to how he looks like in the mainline games now. His Smash Bros. Ultimate model is exactly 8,200 tries, so almost 1,000 tries more than the Smash Bros. For Wii U model. Next we have Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX, released in 2020. Hello my baby, hello my darling, hello my ragtime gal. This one I am a fan of. He's got the darker, bright, vibrant colors. He's got the full squiggle mouth, good proportions, lots of detail. Though he does have this weird little lump at the bottom of his legs. He's got like a saggy booty thing going on here. Same thing with his arms, maybe a little lumpy in places. But other than that, great looking model. Love the bandana. With the bandana, this model is 4,710 tries. Without the bandana, this model is 4,424 tries. For our last mainline game, we have Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, released in 2022. The model itself looks nearly identical to the one from Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. You can see when we overlay them here, looks like they're virtually identical. But he's got some fun texture work going on here. He's got fur now, just like in the Detective Pikachu movie, but not quite as realistic and weird looking. I really like this. He looks nice and soft and cuddly, though they did also get rid of the brown in his eyes for some reason. Oh no, he's just got these big black dots for eyes, but that's okay. Still a really good looking model. And it's just 3,950 tries. surprisingly less than the 6,790 tries from Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Very likely done for performance reasons. And even with that low poly model, the game still ran terribly on the Switch. Kind of funny. And lastly, we have Detective Pikachu Returns, released in 2023, since Pikachu's Pokemon Legends ZA model hasn't been ripped yet, as far as I'm aware. Maybe I can make an addendum to this video someday once that model has been ripped. But anyway, I'm not a huge fan of these Detective Pikachu models. I'm sorry I didn't have the first one. That one also hasn't been ripped yet, as far as I'm aware. But he's just too weird and lumpy looking. I don't like the expression on his face. He's not as cute. He looks sort of alien-like, in my opinion. I do like the hat, but other than that, this just isn't my favorite model. I feel like his red cheeks aren't pronounced enough. The markings on his back and on his tail are pretty faded. The end of his tail is curved now instead of pointy for some reason. I guess if I had to say something nice about this model, the ears still look pretty good, and the hands and feet still look pretty good, I guess. I don't know, the curved tail is not bad. It's kind of growing on me. The Detective Pikachu Returns model is 10,134 tries. So easily the most detailed model we've looked at today, but certainly not the best in my opinion. That honor, I would say, goes to the high polygon count 3DS model. I really liked this one. I like the orange coloring. I feel like everything about him is just the perfect balance. The textures look good, the model itself looks good. He's got a great looking tail, ears, mouth. Proportions look good. Everything about it just really does it for me. But what's your favorite? Let me know in the comments. If you want this Blender file for yourself, consider joining the Patreon or becoming a member here on YouTube for as little as $1 a month. You'll also get your name in the credits of every upcoming video while you're a member. This month I'd like to give a shout out to Les Cooks, Sapphire Owns, and Jay Lisa. Thank you all for being members. As always, let me know who you'd like to see one of these videos on next in the comments. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this, and thanks for watching.